The way I see it, there are essentially three types of gamers right now, and sadly there probably will be for the foreseeable time. Those who managed to obtain a PlayStation 5, those who never plan to, and those who would love to buy one but keep having that opportunity snatched away from them. The limited supply of Sony's next generation console is something everyone who follows the gaming industry could have seen coming. Even I, who forced myself to wake up relatively early the day after actually staying up to watch the company's second presentation back in September, initially found myself out of luck. That particular next day, pre-orders had vanished within half an hour of availability, and I literally thought to myself, I can't believe it, I'm just not gonna get one at launch. Fortunately, I stayed persistent and managed to find a possibility to get not just one, but 2 units pre-ordered by constantly refreshing websites throughout the day, hoping for somebody to cancel their own. The result? My brother and I are now proud owners of our own PlayStation 5s, and we're both definitely enjoying ourselves with it. The problem is, not everybody decided to buy their systems with the intent of actually using them for their true purpose. On places like eBay, scalpers have been offering their PS5s at ridiculous rates, well into the $1,000 to $1,500 price range. What's so conflicting about it is the feeling that I can't really blame them either. At launch, even I had hesitated for a second if I didn't just want to sell that second unit while I could, but I decided that the promise I'd made to my brother was simply too valuable and I wouldn't want to disappoint him just to make some quick cash. Then again, an easy opportunity to make money is something I think almost none of us would ever say no to. In this case, the regrettable part is obviously how others have to be so affected by that particular mindset. People are desperately waiting for PS5s to get back in stock, and I really hope Sony steps up their supply very soon. But what characterized this year for me is that I ended up having this incredible awakening. Through a long personal journey full of new insights and ideas, I came to the realization that it's exactly this kind of mindset you could actually apply elsewhere. That there is more than just this one quick trick to improve your financial stability using the knowledge of something you're actually passionate about, but where it only affects yourself and, if anything, positively influences those you can share your discoveries with. I know this may all still sound a little bit vague, but therefore I'd love to tell you all about it right now. Moving the conversation outside of gaming for a bit, I think it's safe to say 2020 has been a rough year for nearly all of us. Of course, the world is still dealing with the coronavirus. We've been staying at home because of the lockdowns that occurred as a result. And me personally, I've been particularly unlucky, having had to endure a number of personal setbacks on top of it. But if I had to make a prediction, I'd be willing to bet there are many of you who may have felt or still feel as unhappy as I myself had just a few months ago. The circumstances this year truly got me to question several aspects of my life. What is it I really want to achieve? Am I actually satisfied with my current situation? And most important of all, how do I change it? It seemed like every interesting idea that I could come up with was simultaneously just a step too large, so naturally what happens next? Well, you end up doing absolutely nothing, except sit there, continue to wait, and procrastinate even longer. There's some background information about me that I think is important for you to be aware of. In 2017, I graduated in the field of software engineering, but up until now, I purposefully chose not to use my degree, and I plan to keep it that way. Throughout all the years I spent in university, I had this special project on the side. Every day in the late evening hours, I was building up my YouTube and Twitch channels, and it was this part of my day where I truly felt alive. I just loved talking about games. I loved sharing my knowledge with this community that just seemed to keep growing every day. Especially during the time at my internship companies, working full-time weeks, it became clear to me that this couldn't be my future. I just wasn't enjoying myself. Every day I'd be staring at the clock, waiting for it to be 5 p.m. so I could go home, back to doing what it was I actually loved. By the time I finally graduated, I think my subscriber base was around 80,000 members strong, and I had a small but loyal community who watched my live streams on Twitch, donating just enough to keep my goals in sight. It seemed like an impossible task, but what the hell, I figured I may as well try. Instead of looking for a job, I decided to dedicate all my time to my online activities, and that's still where we are right now. Fast forward to 2020 though, and there is a less encouraging reality I think I am now ready to confess. It probably won't come out of nowhere, as you may have noticed it by my depressingly irregular upload schedule as of late, but that motivation I once had to make YouTube videos had also began to fade. To some people that may sound unimaginable, perhaps some may even see me as acting downright ungrateful when having this opportunity to make money with the kind of work that I do. But the thing is, I've personally become convinced that everything we do ultimately just gets repetitive. Think about it, even you may have sometimes felt fatigued when it came to gaming, something that should be a hobby, right? A pastime activity you're supposed to always enjoy. It's the same when it comes to making online content, writing large scripts consisting of several pages, constantly finding unique and interesting ways to switch up your vocabulary, and then spending hours editing to make sure the right footage plays at the right time. It gets redundant after sticking with it for so long. I guess the problem is that while I stayed away from getting a full-time job to avoid becoming an employee, I ended up feeling like one regardless by forcing myself to do the kind of work I no longer seem to enjoy. But obviously, what choice do you really have? In order to pay the bills, money must continue coming in. This is where my personal journey began this summer, through a conversation with a friend of mine, Sander, where we openly discussed these frustrations. He then recommended me something to read, which I reluctantly postponed for a few weeks, not realizing what was waiting to change my entire outlook. It's a book by Robert Kiyosaki that is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Just like my friend did to me, I highly recommend it to you if you've never read it before. In Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert talks about the road to financial freedom, something desired by so many of us, but that only a few will ever actually achieve. Now, getting rich is not something I've ever aspired, and I still don't necessarily do right now. To me, it's about that second word, freedom, about getting to make your own choices and not having to worry that when you're feeling burnt out, when you'd like to switch things up for a while, you can't because your financial obligations force you to keep at it. In his book, Robert argues that what separates rich people from the poor is actually quite simple. Poor people work for money, rich people let their money work for them. Now, I know what you may be thinking right now, that sounds incredibly vague. Believe me, I felt the same, and I'm already usually not the one to fall for inspirational talks and all that jazz. Thankfully, in the book, Robert points out many examples, and the more I delved into it, the more I realized it was actually making so much sense. To put it into my own words, a poor person ignorantly spends all their money on what they think will bring them comfort. Luxury products, a bigger house, a car. The less comfortable reality, however, is that they then spend the rest of their time working even harder to make up for all those costs, going from having no spare money to having maybe a little bit, back to having absolutely zero, and then repeating that cycle for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, the smarter person who ends up becoming rich spends their money on what is bound to make them even more money back in the long term. They invest it into stocks or other assets that increase in value over time. They work hard to start their own company, hire employees with the little money they acquire through hard work, and then with the help of those employees, grow that out even more. They build up a cash flow that exponentially increases as time goes by. Sure, there may be more risk involved, but if you know what you're doing, the payoff is bound to be so much larger. I know I'm going through it relatively fast, so if that still didn't make much sense to you, then let's think about it through the example of the admittedly annoying PlayStation 5 Scalper situation I talked about in the intro. Yes, I can't stand them either, but what did those smart, aka the rich people do? Well, the rich people pre-order lots of PS5s before launch, betting it would go out of stock, only to be proven right and then selling them for crazy high returns. And what about the poor people? Well, the poor people either pre-ordered a single PS5 merely to play on it and bring them some joy, or they were simply too late and are still left in disappointment, waiting for more to become available. Yeah, all that it really comes down to is just not knowing any better. This is literally the key to becoming financially independent. It isn't studying hard to get a job that pays well, it isn't saving up as much as you can only to eventually spend it anyway on a big house, a car or other product and then go back to zero. What will save you from spending the rest of your life working hard for someone else in a constant hope to get a promotion and perhaps a small pay rise one day is to pay yourself first by consistently investing your money in things that will make more money back, and thus growing a monthly flow of cash that will only get bigger over time. Now, to a small fraction of you, these concepts may come as totally old news. To others, a whole new world may just be opening up. It's honestly what happened to me, having never been taught any of this by my parents nor my school teachers, and I blame myself for not doing the research earlier. Nonetheless, I'm still glad I did now, and after allowing myself the time to let many of these ideas sink in, I will say I realized in the back of my head that also I may have actually always been on the right track in certain ways. For example, through YouTube, the concept of a passive income was something I was already familiar with. A passive income means a monthly stream of revenue coming into your bank account where you were no longer required to work for that money yourself. While it took me 8 years of blood, sweat and tears to produce the 1,000+ videos that are still up on my channel, they now continue getting a small number of views, and I still receive some ad revenue from them at the end of every month. Because of this, I can actually afford to take breaks every now and then, without having to worry that I'll be making absolutely zero. Of course, the amount will be lower because new videos do make up the bulk of the views I get each month, but it's a welcome extra that reduces some of the pressure. The same thing goes with live streaming. Over on Twitch, I have a decent number of loyal viewers who are subscribed to me because they enjoy my streams and how much I interact with them. Whether I choose to stream every day or a few times a week, most of them will stay subscribed nonetheless, meaning that the money I get doesn't usually fluctuate too heavily. YouTube and Twitch are great forms to grasp the idea of a passive income, but trust me, they are far from the only ones. To give you some ideas, you could write a book and end up like a J.K. Rowling, who still makes millions each year just off the Harry Potter series she wrote literally decades ago. Especially now in this digital age, the possibilities for all of us are limitless. You could set up a web shop and sell your own products. You could build a useful smartphone app or your very own indie game. All these things will allow you to do the work once, and if your product catches on and becomes popular, you may end up benefiting from that work for years to come. You know how they always say time is money? Well, what it comes down to is that your time is precious, and thus it's all the more important that you choose to spend it wisely, to invest it where it can deliver you the most satisfaction, whether that is in personal enjoyment or financial results, giving you more freedom and thus more opportunity for those fun activities. I think this is an important connection to make, because once you understand this, then you will also understand Robert Kiyosaki's line of letting your money work for you. For example, what if you had this one great idea, but you didn't possess the skills necessary to realize it? Well, you could pay someone else to help you do so, and then either benefit from the potential profits or take your losses in the case it didn't catch on as you'd have hoped. Now, some people just aren't made to be leaders, they'd rather be those employees who enjoy being given tasks rather than handing them out themselves. And you know what? That's also completely fine. Even for those people, plenty of other investment options remain, like commodities, real estate, or the most accessible form of investing, the stock market. Of course, there is always some element of risk involved, and the bigger the risk, the bigger your possible losses or profits could be. That's why being able to calculate your risks is very important, and the best way to reduce those is by understanding what it is you're investing in. Using the current debacle around CD Projekt Red to highlight the many dangers of the stock market may not exactly be the best way in order to encourage people to look into it. After the release of Cyberpunk 2077, the company's stock price took a nosedive, going from around 443 Polish zlotys to around 269 at the time of writing this video. Within just a few weeks, people who put their faith into the company at the wrong time could have potentially seen their investments halve in value. Nonetheless, CD Projekt Red is actually a perfect example, not only of the high risk, but also the amazing potential of dipping your toes into the stock market. While the recent developments may make it seem like an absolute no-go, the reality is that anyone who invested in the company anywhere before 2020 is still standing at a profit right now. In fact, even the value of one stock at this moment, after its massive crash, still stands tall at around 10 times the amount it was back in 2015, when The Witcher 3 had already been released, and any experienced gamer could have seen the high potential this company quite obviously had then, and perhaps, or perhaps not, still may now have. For a bit more of a practical fact, merely investing $50 into CD Projekt Red then would mean you'd have all the money needed to afford a PS5 right now. What I myself discovered this year is that I had wasted all this time gaining so much information about the games industry. For years I've predicted the content for E3 presentations, how particular upcoming games would be received, which direction the industry would be heading into, the many development studios and whether they'd grow or decline. Very often a lot of it turned out to be pretty accurate, yet somehow I never actually realized I could use that knowledge in a way that could truly benefit me. After reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, I finally went ahead and bought my first couple of stocks, immediately noticing how all the preconceptions about needing lots of money to begin were totally wrong. Before, stocks had always seemed like the most boring occupation to me. You know exactly what I mean. Those images of endless rows of numbers, the associations with politically correct corporate figureheads in tight suits and wearing ties, it was always enough for me to stay far away from it until now. But then I also looked up some YouTube videos, and I slowly began to understand that investing wasn't just another alternative for the crazy casino addicts among us. If you know what you're doing, it can be a genuinely responsible way of handling your money too. In fact, I myself now see it as a more responsible way, compared to just letting it rot away in a savings account like I had for so long, where I learned it actually slowly loses its value over time due to inflation. Now, to fully explain all the ins and outs of the stock market and all the different strategies you could take would probably require me to make several other videos fully dedicated towards it, but for now I can tell you some of the reasons why I would highly recommend you to look into it. First of all, especially if you're still young, starting early with investing may mean you'll be able to retire at a relatively young age. It can also allow you to slowly build up a steady cash flow, allowing you to afford all the products you could now only dream of just by staying patient and learning not to desperately spend your money in whichever way you could waste it right now. Last of all, it may give you financial freedom, provide lots of leeway so you won't be forced to work that full-time job at a place where you simply may not be happy for the rest of your life. Perhaps most importantly, I myself learned that picking stocks was actually a lot of fun. It allows me to put all that knowledge I gained into practice, rewarding me for making the right calls, and it has given me a new goal in life that I'm staying focused on. Now, because I have always been passionate about gaming, it's where the majority of my investments are currently going. I especially like putting my money into some of the smaller publishers, because I very much believe in the AA model for single-player games in the future, but again, that is just me. There is plenty of choice, and I recommend you go with what interests you, and you'll be able to keep an eye on. Now, I will say that diversification is something that is very important to lower the amount of risk you take. You obviously do not want your financial situation to fully rely on the success of just one industry, and therefore it may be recommended to also look into other sectors for some extra spread. By the way, you can also be totally lazy about it and go with so-called ETFs, which are large baskets of sometimes thousands of companies, so you're automatically hugely diversified and don't have to really keep much of an eye on any news. A general rule of thumb is that the economy always goes up over the long term, so even if you are bored by stocks, well, as long as you're willing to stay patient and invest for the distant future, then you will most likely be reaping lots of benefits. But at the end of the day, do your own research, find other, perhaps smaller YouTube channels who can give you information and provide healthy contradictions to each other so you don't get sucked into a bubble. The more you learn, the better you'll do. Knowledge, not having lots of money, is ultimately key. But in the end, it does come down to that one line: don't work for money, let the money work for you, that I really took to heart and I tried to apply wherever I could. Earlier this year, I took a long, hard look at all I had going on in my life, the aspects I still enjoyed about YouTube and the ones I did less. What I ultimately figured was that for me, the problem wasn't so much that my passion for gaming was actually gone. When I talked to friends, whenever I was asked a question about the current status of what's going on within the world of games, I realized that the enthusiasm was still there and it's as fiery as it's always been. I don't ever expect that to go away. That being said, certain aspects have clearly become stale, and it's those aspects I wanted to focus on and find solutions for. Being creative, coming up with new ideas, collecting my thoughts and planning out a video is something I still love doing. Actually putting it together, acquiring the right footage, and spending hours changing up my vocabulary on paper to sound more interesting, not so much. For me, that has meant I've started exploring a few other business opportunities for the future, as well as outsourcing some of these current tasks. I have an awesome editor, Josh, who's been putting these videos together now, and I've also begun looking for a creative assistant who could perhaps help me translate my thoughts to paper more frequently. I'm trying to find new ways to apply all the principles Robert Kiyosaki taught me, as I am very much aware that there are people still out there who value my opinions and insights because they tell me all the time, and I truly want to give them more of that. For a long time, I was very doubtful about the future, but the more time passes now, I think I'm finally beginning to find my drive back. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to make this video at first because of course it's something totally different, but I tried my very best to tie this topic of investing to gaming where I could, and I hope that it proved both interesting as well as maybe even, helpful. Investing has become this huge new interest of mine, and because of that, I actually plan on making more videos about it. So after watching this video, if you found it interesting and you want to learn more about it, then please head over to my second YouTube channel that I've got called RobinGaming, which will actually be linked right next to me. And over there, I'll be posting a lot more videos about this and to help you get started. So go check that out, and of course if you enjoy all the content that I make, then please check out my Patreon account, which is patreon.com/RobinGaming. You can support me there for just $1 a month and get early access to all my videos. So for now, I really hope you enjoyed it, and then I'd like to thank you a lot for watching and hope to see you again next time.